Hello and welcome. My name is Gina Clarke and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Fintech Times. I'm joined by Eelco Dettingmeijer, Nuvei's Senior Vice President for Sales and Partnerships in EMEA. He heads a growing team responsible for Nuvei's growth strategy in all commercial sectors across the EMEA region. And today in this fireside chat, we'll be discussing global trends in digital payments, examining NFTs and future audiences. So welcome, Eelco. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Gina. Very nice to be here.
And I'd like to start by talking about the current trend in digital payments and NFTs. What's your take on it and where has it come from?
Well, 2021, I think in payments is really the year where NFTs are taking off massively. We've seen a lot of new businesses being started within this space and sort of existing businesses and really moving into the NFT space. I think there's probably a few reasons behind it, but one of the main drivers, as far as I can see it, is the global pandemic. I think having digital assets and having a digital identity around sort of things in gaming, like skins in video gaming, for example, has really brought this to the surface and is allowing this to take off in the way that it's doing.
Yeah, you mentioned the pandemic and gaming, certainly. Is that because, you know, we've been stuck at home looking for something to do, perhaps something to spend our money on, and physically it's been very difficult?
Yeah, exactly that. I think so. And because we spend so much more time online probably and so little time in the public space and sort of things where we have to buy clothes or a nice new suit for a wedding, all these things were off the table for the last year and a half. So then being able to spend your money on digital assets and your digital identity in a certain way has really, in my mind at least, accelerated the growth of the NFTs.
And you mentioned lots of new businesses emerging in the space. What's been your experience and perception of this?
Well, the type of businesses that we see moving into the NFT space are numerous, right? There's a large ecosystem, everything that has to do with the creation of NFTs, but then there's also the trading itself, so marketplaces, and it spreads across a very wide variety. You really see art and architecture, but also very simple stuff like a certain logo or like I mentioned, a certain skin, but also some amazing things like the first tweet from Jack Dorsey, which I think made 2.9 million or something idiotic. But yeah, those are the things that really spring to mind. I think the use cases we're only scratching the surface at the moment. We're going to see a lot more of these, hopefully in the coming years.
Yeah, you mentioned the Jack Dorsey tweet there. Do you think that's doing good for the image and the perception of NFTs, or do we need some of these wacky things to kind of drive the space?
I do feel that we sort of need this because it got a lot of people talking about it. It got a lot of people actually investigating and starting to read about what it is and what the use cases can be. So initially you needed a few of those big headlines and things that make the news to get a wider adoption. I think the same was true for cryptocurrencies probably 7 or 8 years ago, where you had a few very sort of early adopters doing certain things or getting paid in crypto, trying to order a coffee in San Francisco. And these type of news feeds usually drive adoption because people start to look into it and start to investigate and understand what it can do.
And you mentioned some of the industries there, gaming. What about other sector-specific industries that you're looking at the moment?
For me, one of the most interesting use cases, I think, is fashion. So NFTs in fashion will probably see a massive growth. Initially, it sounded a bit like a sci-fi movie, but I do feel that, and also from talking to a lot of fashion brands, I do know that there is a lot of investment going into this. And it kind of makes sense because a lot of the things around cryptocurrency and everything that is token based got a bad rap in terms of sustainability. And this can really turn that around, because you can imagine that NFT and fashion is, of course, a lot more sustainable. You basically cut out an entire ecosystem and transportation and production and all these environmental unfriendly things, and go to something that is purely digital. Then it also really helps in terms of the exclusivity. So I think more and more people are really wanting to have a quite a unique and exclusive way of dressing themselves, and I think high fashion has been very much about that. But of course, NFT, because it's always unique and it's always exclusive to you, it really feeds into that need.
You mentioned art as well, and I know lots of people are getting excited in the art world because an NFT can establish the provenance of something. Is that the same when it comes to fashion? You want to be the only person wearing a certain creation?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it does. I think, of course, art and fashion, in my mind, are quite close together, especially when you talk about haute couture, which are always these unique pieces. And I think it also speaks to the same emotions with people. So having something that is truly unique, having something that is desired by a lot of people, and although it's not physical, but it is a digital asset, I think that is a large portion of what's driving value. I don't think we are sort of at a point where we truly understand the value of these things, because it's a bit all over the shop at the moment. It can range from €2 to 20 million euros for certain things. But I think that will normalize as well, and we'll start to really value and appreciate these things moving forward.
I guess just touching on the future for a moment, where do you see this going in around 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think if I look at my own life, I'm now 40, so I'm not massively interested by nature in having sort of digital fashion or a specific skin in a video game. But if I look at my son, who's now 12, he spent a lot of time on his digital identity, and he also spends a lot of money on his digital identity. And within probably around about 10 years from now, he'll have disposable income, and I think that digital identity and his spending behavior will probably continue, and he'll probably continue to invest money in that. So yeah, to answer your question, I think the generation that is now being brought up with having a unique identity online, spending money on that, is much more the target audience for this than my generation.
It's funny how you bring up the generational trends, because I think there will be this kind of chasm, I guess, between those of a certain age today and those that are growing up, and their acceptance of digital items. You've mentioned your own sons. How do you think sort of children growing up today will be vastly different from their parents and grandparents?
Well, I think if I look at the difference between myself and my parents, that's already sort of miles apart. But then if you take into account the speed in which technology has evolved over the past, let's say, 20 years, I was having a discussion yesterday with my son and daughter about how it worked when I was 12 and getting to hang out with your friends. You had to phone their parents and ask if they were home. And they were like, "But you had Nokias back then." I said, no, Nokias were for businessmen, and they were carrying it around on sort of 20 kilos worth of batteries. So if you take that into account, I do feel that the behavior and sort of the focus of my children will be very different to what we're seeing today. And with that, also the economy will probably massively change. They are going to spend their money differently to how we are doing that today.
And do you think the world around us is ready for that? Because just going back to sort of children and playing games, e-games, you buy something in the app or in the game, and there might be a block on the transference of that. So what you're wearing in one game, you might not be able to transfer and wear in another. And I know there are platforms which do allow you to do this, but I still feel that we're quite limited in perhaps what we're experiencing at the moment.
We are, and I think that's sort of the same maturing of a lot of things that we've seen over the years, right? So I remember having to change my phone charger every 6 months because I dropped the phone, and then I bought this other phone who had a different charger. And we're seeing more and more standardization and more um, using similar devices or similar programs, whether it's software or online, where you can use your assets, to say so. And I think the same will happen with all these digital assets. So I think crypto will hopefully be a big driver there as well, because from let's say a virtual currency, sort of a decentralized currency that is either within game or it's one of the main cryptos that should allow you to move freely between those different virtual currencies and between those different games and platforms.
And I guess here in sort of Europe and the West, we get criticized for our fast fashion, whether that is the different battery that you need for every mobile phone, or if it's just, you know, the ability to pop to the shops and pick up a top on your way home. Do you think that somehow the lack of a cycle in the NFT and the crypto space will help us become more sustainable and more conscious of the environment?
I sure hope so. I always think that we sort of reached peak consumer in terms of physical stuff that we can buy, and then something new comes along, and all of a sudden everybody needs that as well. But I think when you look at online, and when you look at sort of the e-commerce space, I do feel that was 5 years ago there were probably quite an equal split between physical goods being bought online and digital goods. I think it's fair to say now that around about 75 to 80% is already in the digital goods space, whether that's streaming subscription, or whether that's video games, or whether it's financing products. I think a lot of that is moving that way, and then at the end of the day, that is a good thing, I think, for a lot of the things that we do, for example, around fast fashion.
And I guess as a final question, looking at the space, and it's still an emerging sector, but what do you think that companies need to do to succeed? Should they be mindful of new and innovative ways that consumers are driving, or do they look to answer the situation that we've been through the pandemic? What advice would you give to a business looking to kind of start in the NFT space and succeed?
Yeah, I think like with every business, whether it's online, offline, I think a lot of it is around authenticity. So some of the most successful things I've seen have been quite niche in terms of their focus. So when you are a startup and you try to cover everything, that's usually not the best approach, especially in the NFT space, because there's so much to go after. Whether it's creation, or whether it's being a marketplace, or whether it's being a platform for creators, for example. There's all different sorts, and then within creation, of course, there's also different niches. So recently we've been talking to a few businesses who do everything in the NFT space related to football, and that's quite a successful story so far. The same goes with art. There's this famous story I heard on the news, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks back, about a Belgian artist who was quite unknown. And then all of a sudden his friends told him about NFT. And between March and the end of June, I think he made something like 4 million selling his digital art. And he was a relatively unknown artist. So it's around authenticity. So staying true to your values and yourself, and also trying to be the best at that. And yeah, that's it.
And those sorts of that's got to say that there's an audience for this already. You know, crypto took a long time to burn, slow burn, as they say.
Yeah.
Do you think people are more ready and willing to invest in NFTs?
I think they are, and I think a lot of it is due to the recent boom that we've seen, although things slowed down now, but the recent boom that we've seen within the cryptocurrency space. So people, as soon as the word token is involved, people get very excited on the let's say asset side of things. So on the potential of earning money over your investment. And of course, this really plays into that nicely. I'm really hoping that cryptos will become more and more a method or a rails for payments, and that everything that has to do with the investment side of crypto, which also causes a lot of the volatility, of course, will move more towards things like NFTs.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Eelco, for joining me today. And I hope you have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you. It's lovely doing it, Gina. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.